Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 133. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on this episode and this channel where I talk about movies, new movies that come out in streaming or in theaters. We break them down on this podcast. First section of the podcast, non-spoilers. If you want to get an idea about what the movie's about, how it made me feel, what I enjoyed about it and maybe didn't enjoy about it, and then a slight recommendation, whether you should check it out or maybe skip it. And then the second part of the podcast, we start diving into a little bit more into spoiler territory. We talk about pros and cons, some of my favorite shots or favorite performances, and then we close it all off and decide after one viewing, is this movie timeless? Is it a film that I would go back to and rewatch various different times in the future? Before we start talking about this week's movie, though, I did want to highlight that the Timeless Movie Podcast is available on all platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Give us a follow, subscribe, comment, like, do all the good stuff. I would love to interact with you guys about some of the movies that we've been recently talking about. Speaking of some recent movies that we've reviewed, I did want to highlight that episode 132 of the Timeless Movie Podcast is available on those platforms that we just talked about a little bit before. And I ended up talking about the new film in the Karate Kid franchise, Karate Kid Legends. I will be honest, I am not the biggest fan of the Karate Kid franchise. I've actually only seen the original, but I wanted to give this new Karate Kid Legends a chance. And so I did. I enjoyed it, had a good time, wasn't disappointed, but go ahead and listen to episode 132. That way you can get my full thoughts on that new movie and whether I considered it timeless. And then feel free in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my opinions about Karate Kid Legends. Also wanted to let you know that Timeless Movie Podcast is available on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. Go ahead and give us a follow there as well. That way you can comment and talk about some of the movies that I'm reviewing. Let me know if you have any questions. And also, it's a great resource if you're ever curious as to when a new episode drops. All right, that's enough talking about the podcast. Let's go ahead now and dive into episode 133, in which we are talking about A24's newest movie, Bring Her Back. This one is directed by Michael and Danny Filippo, and it is about horror. I saw a trailer of it a couple of months ago, and I'm not going to lie, I was a little hesitant. It looked freaky, it looked very intense, and it had these kind of found footage ritual things that were going on. And you know me, if you've listened to enough of the podcast, I am not the biggest fan of horror. I have slowly gotten better at it, watched more and more horror as the years have gone on. So I've given it more of a chance, and some of them have really surprised me. And, although I was a little hesitant about this one, I wanted to give it a shot. One, because it's A24, and then two, I had heard really great things about Danny and Michael Filippo's Talk to Me. I haven't seen that movie, but I heard great reviews as to how scary, but also how great the story was. So I was really hoping that the story in this film and Bring Her Back would be just the same as well. Could it get my attention and could it keep me engaged, or is it all going to be just about jump scares? All right, let's go ahead and segue now that I got to check out the movie in theaters this past weekend. Let's now dive into the non-spoiler section of the Timeless Movie Podcast. All right, now that I got to check out Bring Her Back, I will say that I really dug this movie. It was intense. It had some freaky imagery. There was just so many things that were going on that just creep you out in regards to what the characters are going through. I think Bring Her Back really exemplifies how horror can be done in a really good way, not because of the jump scares, but because there is a great blend of horror and drama and horror and emotion. I think that's really what makes this film stick out to me and why I think I had such a great time watching this film is because it's not trying to just scare you. Although, again, there is imagery and there is gore and there is these scenes where you're just creeped out. You're like, what am I watching? Yet, I'm able to connect to the characters. I'm able to really feel and be a part of this world. And so I thought it did a phenomenal job doing that throughout the entire story. And again, that's something that a lot of horror films miss. I might sound like a broken record, but a lot of horror films try to really get you on the scares and not so much on the story. And I feel like Bring Her Back did not do that. They had a perfect balance in regards to showing you these very scary images and these gore-filled scenes, yet also bringing it back to the entire story of, well, here's what really matters. Here are the characters and what they're going through. So, again, great job with this film. I enjoyed it. Now, let me give you a little plot synopsis. Let me tell you what the story is about without spoiling too much. That way, if you're interested in checking this movie out, hopefully this will kind of give you that sense as to, okay, yeah, maybe this is a film that is kind of in my same wavelength that I might want to watch. Okay, the film starts off with these creepy found footage videos that show a cult that is doing some type of ritual. Now, when I say these types of rituals, it is very intense imagery. So this is one of those things that where if you're very, you know, maybe you're not too much into having these types of visuals shown to you, like somebody being hung and somebody dying, maybe this might not be the movie for you, but that's essentially what some of this found footage was showing you. And essentially, it's just setting you up for what is going to be the main ritual of this movie, which is trying to bring somebody back from the dead. And so that's essentially what the ritual is showing you here. And then eventually, you get to meet the main characters of this movie. First character we get introduced to is called Piper. Piper is played by Sora Wong. She is a visually impaired character, and so she is not completely blind, but she explains throughout the movie that she can only make out shapes and some items that she can see, but again, she can't really make out faces and anything of that nature. And so Piper is shown at the beginning of the movie trying to make friends with other folks, but she ends up kind of getting made fun of because of being visually impaired. And then we eventually get to meet her stepbrother, Andy. Andy's played by Billy Barrett, and he ends up trying to protect Piper at all times. You get to see how connected they are, making fun of each other sometimes, but you always see that, Andy really cares for Piper throughout the movie. Unfortunately, how the story ends up turning is Piper and Andy end up going home, and they end up going into a traumatic event in which they lose their father. He ends up slipping in the shower, and they call for help, and he eventually passes away. And so this puts them in a very tricky situation because now they have no guardian, and so now they are put into a foster home. Luckily, there is a woman that is willing to foster them. At first, she actually only wanted to foster Piper and not Andy, but ended up accepting Andy as well. And this foster mom is named Laura. Laura also went through a very traumatic event in which she lost her daughter a couple of months ago as well, or years, I think, at that point of the movie. And then Andy ends up noticing right from the get-go that Laura prefers Piper over him. And then slowly but surely, Andy realizes that Laura is actually hiding a very dark secret and very disturbing that's going to actually put both Piper and Andy in danger. So I'm going to leave it at that. That's the setup of the movie. It is overall a great time. Again, if you're into this type of like very horror filled imagery, you're into a little bit of gore and things that are shown like that are very, again, ritualistic and cult like. If you're into those types of stories and movies, then I highly recommend you guys check this one out because not only are you going to be satisfied with the horror that is shown, but I think you're going to be surprised by the emotional and the story-driven elements of this movie. Just everything about the characters and what their backstories were just helped me connect with them, which is what made me enjoy this movie. So again, if you're into horror, if you don't mind a little gore, if you don't mind these very intense images of found footage, then I highly recommend you check this out. If you're not good with gore or cults or anything of that nature, then maybe just stay away from this movie because it might be a little too intense. All right, those are all of my non-spoiler thoughts in regards to Bring Her Back. Now let's go ahead and start spoiling some stuff about Bring Her Back. So if you do not want to be spoiled and you have not seen Bring Her Back, please jump out of the video, watch the movie, then come back and whether you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube, leave a comment, leave a review. That way we can interact and talk a little bit more about Bring Her Back. Okay, hopefully gave you guys enough time to jump out if you don't want to be spoiled. So here we go. First pro for me of Bring Her Back has got to be the incredible cinematography of this movie. There are so many great shots, the way that they frame the camera and the way that they use it to not only show different perspectives of characters, but also to intensify the horror at times just was so well done. I just have to give props to the team and the cinematographers. Again, I want to shout out Aaron McCliskey. Great job with the cinematography. There are specific frames and shots where you have this character named Oliver. Oliver is a mute child that lives with Laura, but Oliver, played by Jonah Wren Phillips, ends up turning out to be something that Andy and Piper were not expecting. But there's certain shots where the camera is behind Oliver, and so you're seeing from his perspective, but it just looks so ominous, so weird and eerie because you slowly start to realize that something is inside of Oliver. He's not himself. Something is up, and soon you'll realize that it's actually not Oliver. There's actually some type of a demon inside of him. So very crazy stuff. We'll talk a little bit more about Oliver in another pro, but again, I really appreciated how they were able to leverage the camera and utilize it to show different types of elements. One of those elements being circles. So a part of this same pro, circles was such a big symbol in this movie. The circle represented so many things. Now, in our life and in religions and just things that go on in our real world, circles can mean a lot of things, right? Circles can mean unity. It can mean something that is just cyclical, meaning that it has no beginning or end. It is just continuous. But I really loved how they used the cinematography and they used it to show circles within Laura's house, shower heads. They would even show from an eagle's eye view the circle of a ritual that is surrounding the house. So everything in this film revolved around circles. Even the rituals that Laura, played by Sally Hawkins, would do to Oliver. Oliver, again, is being possessed in this ritual. He has a demon inside of him. And what Laura does in order to calm him down is to basically just do the shape of a circle over his head. It was so creepy. It was so weird. But again, the entire cinematography of that just intensified it even more. So circles, if you end up watching the movie, let me know if you agree with me on that one. But circles was such a big and prominent symbol that was shown in this film. And it was done on purpose. It's not something that's hidden. It is very clearly trying to tell you, hey, look, this is what was going on. Circles representing the different rituals, circles representing the shapes that maybe Piper can see, just all this different stuff. It's just very intense, but I really loved how they were able to pull it off in this movie. Okay, second pro that I want to highlight, bringing it back to the character of Oliver. Oliver ends up being this character that, again, at first you meet him, you think he's mute, but then you realize that he just doesn't seem normal. And then you find out that he has a demon inside of him because Laura, her end goal is to basically have this demon try to capture and get Piper in order to bring her daughter back. Essentially, she wants the demon to take almost like the soul and the components of her dead daughter and then put those into Piper in order to then get her daughter back. So very intense, very ridiculous type of rituals that Laura wants to go through. But why I consider Oliver the second pro is the evolution of Oliver. How he changes from the beginning of the movie to the end is just so damn creepy. He starts off again as a normal kid. He's got like a buzz cut. He just seems like a little awkward. He doesn't talk. And then as you see him go throughout the movie, his entire body changes because again, he's not a kid. He's at this point inside Laura's house. He is a demon. And so he ends up having these crazy moments where he gets a knife and he ends up trying to eat the knife. And it almost feels like he has no pain. He cuts himself. He eats different types of materials around the house. And slowly his body starts being deformed. His head starts getting bigger. His belly starts bloating up. And it's just very intense imagery. And this is kind of some of the imagery that just kind of feels very scary, where almost to the point where you want to look away because of how weird and how intense it's getting for Oliver, and you feel bad for the kid. And so that whole evolution of Oliver going from like a normal kid to then turning into this very deformed monster and creature, just unbelievable how they were able to pull off the prosthetics and the makeup and the costuming. So shout out to, again, the production and the costume team for Bring Her Back, because they just made me look at Oliver in a very different way. I was just creeped out. And again, that just adds to the horror of this movie. And just seeing him just completely change was just unreal. But again, that's going to be my second pro. Third pro for Bring Her Back is going to be the emotional moments of this movie. and again, the drama of the three main characters of Piper, Andy, and Laura. I'll start with Andy. Andy was the brother. And you immediately connected with him because you could tell that he loved his stepsister. He loved Piper. He wanted to protect her at all times, even to some points of having to kind of lie at times. There's a scene where they go to the funeral home for their father, and Piper's asking, "How does he look?" And Andy tells her, "He looks good." But when you look up at his face, he's actually not looking. And so he wants to protect Piper and let her know that although that the world can be hard, he doesn't want her to have a hard life. And so again, it's those types of scenes and moments that make you connect with Andy. But then there's other things. He had a traumatic past. He actually did not like his father. His father would abuse him. And he actually was traumatized. He had these kind of PTSD types of moments in the shower because in the shower is where his dad would turn on the shower head and would beat him and would abuse him. And he would do that so that Piper wouldn't hear or know what was going on when they were younger. And so those types of moments, although very dark, although very, sad as well, it's what helps me connect myself to the characters. And so I was always behind Andy. Same thing with Piper. Piper being visually impaired, but also being innocent. She's the innocence of this movie. She just wants to be accepted. She wants to be loved like everybody else, and she doesn't want to be treated any differently just because she is visually impaired. And she's missing that parent figure. Because her dad passes away at the beginning of the movie, she's looking for something to fill in the void. And at one time, ends up choosing Laura. Laura ends up being that parent figure, although she ends up making a mistake at that point, but she finds out the truth. It's just that kind of innocence and the way that Piper is just trying to be a normal kid, again, makes me very much resonate with how I want to have that character survive throughout the movie. And then you even have Laura. Laura is played by Sally Hawkins. Laura is the villain. She's the antagonist. You should not be able to connect with her, but they set up the backstory that she lost her daughter. Her daughter was also blind and visually impaired, and all she wants to do to an obsessive state is bring her back. She wants to be called mom again. She wants to feel like she is a motherly figure again. And although she has that in a way with Piper, she still wants her own daughter back. And so even to that extent, like Laura, you're supposed to hate this character, and you do. I completely thought she was demented, she was crazy. Yet by the end, you're like, well, okay, I understand the choices that she make. Would I do that? Of course not. But you understand why Laura did that. And so again, all of these different types of elements just connect themselves within this movie. And this is what I took away from it is the emotional, the drama filled moments of Bring Her Back. This is what really made me like this movie so much. Not the horror as much, not the imagery and the creepiness. It was more of this emotional aspect of every single character. All right, now we're going to move into the cons. Make this one really quick. I don't really have any. I mean, this didn't really give me any types of scenes or moments where I didn't feel like it brought my experience down. All of the performances were really great. So again, very quick, no notes on my side. Now there might be some, horror tropes that we always see, but I forgave those. I didn't really care as I was watching the movie. I was just so enthralled with what was going on. Okay, now moving away from cons, let's go ahead now and jump into some awards. Let's give some awards for MVP, for best shot or best moment. Let's go ahead now and give the MVP award. Who is the one character where this film just, without them, just doesn't feel like it would hit the same? I kind of mentioned her a little bit before, but I'm going to go with Sally Hawkins as Laura. She puts on such a crazy performance. Again, she starts off at the beginning of the movie trying to be that foster mom, trying to be very lovely, very kind. And as you start seeing her, when she watches some of the tape of the rituals, when she's trying to calm Oliver down, there's just so many moments where her eyes just can tell you what she's actually thinking. She might have a smile on her face, but it just looks so freaking creepy. So Sally Hawkins is my favorite performance. She is the MVP. There's just so many things that she does in this movie where, again, you're just hoping that she goes down. You're hoping that you don't want her to complete the ritual because of all the terrible things that she's been doing. She ends up killing Andy. She ends up killing Wendy, another former coworker. All this different stuff. She tortures Oliver essentially, putting a demon inside of him. So there's so many things that she does, but in her performance, it's just so demented and so out there. But it just caught my eyes every single time. All right, moving on to best scene of the movie. I will say that the best moment was actually a confrontation between Andy and Laura, and Piper was actually in the actual same room. What ends up happening is Laura's trying to convince Piper that Andy is crazy. He's doing all these things and trying to hurt her, and even convinces Piper that Andy punched her in the middle of the night, when in reality, it was Laura. And so this whole moment ends up leading to a confrontation where you have Andy just telling Laura that she is going to get stopped. Whatever she's doing, it is not going to work. And then you have Laura just instigating, almost to a point where Andy ends up punching a wall. And it looks like he's about to punch and hurt Laura, but instead, he's able to control himself and just punch the wall and leave a hole in there. And so that intense scene, just again, it's just great back and forth between Andy and Laura. And then you just have Piper trying to calm everything down, but she just cannot do anything to stop this intense discussion. So that one scene, I think at the beginning of the third act, was my favorite moment of the movie, of just trying to have Andy convince Piper, like, hey, there's something wrong. It's Laura. Laura's the one that's doing all this to us, and we need to leave. And so great scene and great moment. And then finally, my favorite shot of the movie. This award is going to go to this one camera shot where you have Oliver on the kitchen table. He's waiting for Andy to cut a piece of melon for him to feed him, and the camera is just right behind him. Again, it just looks so freaking creepy because you know at this point that Oliver is not well. He is not himself. He's not really even a kid. He is a demon at that point. And so you just see this shot of the back of his head just waiting and then his hand twitching, hitting the kitchen table. That one shot was really well done. Okay, those are all of my thoughts in regards to Bring Her Back. A lot of positive thoughts, a lot of great things that came out of this movie. But now we have to answer the final question. Is this movie timeless? Can I see myself rewatching this movie in the future? Although I really loved this movie, I was engrossed in the story. I felt like I was a part of this world because of the fact that it deals with such emotional and trauma-filled moments. I will say that it is not a timeless movie for me, with the caveat that I would not mind rewatching this if a friend wanted to watch a scary movie, or if they wanted to watch something that, just they hadn't seen before, that was kind of horror related. I would definitely recommend this to friends, to other people that are just into the horror genre. This is just such a great movie because, again, although it is horror, that's kind of what gets you into it. It's the story that I think was going to keep a lot of people from just moving away from it and really continuing to talk about it after the film is over. So, I guess I'm on the fence, but I will say that for me personally, it is not a timeless movie. I wouldn't just kind of go into a weekend and be like, I can't wait to watch Bring Her Back. That's just not the feeling I get. But I would not mind recommending this, and I will continue to praise this movie because of how great it is. So I guess potential to be timeless, if that makes sense. So those are going to be my opinions. But I want to hear from all of you. Have you seen Bring Her Back? If you have, let me know down below in the comments. Did you enjoy this movie? And do you think it is timeless? Let me know if you do down below. All right, everybody. Appreciate all of those that stayed all the way through to listen to my full thoughts about A24's newest movie, Bring Her Back. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 133 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out the next episode that we release because we're going to be covering the new film in the John Wick universe. That is right. We are back and we're going to be covering Ballerina. All right, everybody. Appreciate all those that listened to the podcast. Make sure to check out that next episode, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks.